Yep, it is the Blue Room, and it is another week, another tough game for Everton this weekend. Unfortunately, that great run, 7 games unbeaten, came to an end against Manchester United. But what better chance to start a new one than a ground, which is really difficult to go to against one of our former players. It'll be wonderful, won't it? Joining me this week to tell us how Everton are going to go to North London and win against Richarlison, Son, Harry Kane, Kulusevski and Conte on Saturday. Patric Ridge back on the show. Patrick, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks. I'm just trying to think how Everton are going to win on on Saturday.
We'll do that at the end.
Maybe the other two can tell us.
Yeah, you've got around 40 minutes to formulate your master plan. We'll go to that. Adam Sutton, Adam, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. Apart from yesterday, I was training for my football team and picked up an injury trying to chase one of the young lads around. Basically, turned me inside out, and then I started to rugby tackle him, and I've landed on my wrist. So don't know what the actual damage is. A tendon, I think, but yeah, still being forced to play on Saturday though. I don't know what's worse, being forced to play when injured or being forced to watch Everton, but I'll have to do one or the other. But other than that, good.
Oh, mate, would you say you're the Blue Room's Yerry Mina in that sense? Just always picking.
Do you know what? Like, seriously, I am. I am always injured, whether it's a true injury or an injury that I think I'm injured. I'm definitely the Blue Room's Yerry Mina. Always something wrong with me.
Yeah. Best dancer, most charismatic, but made of biscuits.
I'll take that.
Yeah, also joined us as well, Paul McFarlane. Paul, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, still recovering from Sunday's disappointing result and that, but trying to be optimistic here. I mean, 2 seasons ago we did go to Tottenham and win 1-0, so there's always a bit of hope, isn't there?
That feels like it didn't really happen, that game.
It's like a different lifetime, isn't it, when you look back to that? The optimism, the hope, the feeling of the club moving forward, and probably lasted for about 3 weeks.
Absolutely remarkable, yeah. It's that game feels like a lifetime ago. I remember vividly thinking, oh my God, we've got a midfield. I'm thinking Andre Gomez and Alan were amazing. And, yeah, it lasted for about a few weeks. But we won't dwell on United too long, lads, but obviously Nolly's you've been on the pod this week, so it'd be interested to get your thoughts on it. Adam has thrown his head back there, even to mention of that particular game. So I'll come to you first on it, mate. Just very quickly, your thoughts on the game, because I think a lot of us were quite optimistic going into it. I've been watching United struggle against City, and then, of course, again in midweek. But Everton just were nowhere near it, were they?
No, I think it's a funny one with United because they seem to do it in stages of a season, or you've seen them under Ten Hag especially be that wounded animal almost, isn't it? And he gets a reaction out of them a lot of the time. So I was walking up to the ground on Sunday evening at 6:30, stupidly, and I was thinking, just got a feeling about this, that it's not all going to go as planned really, and as everyone else would have planned, because as you say, unbeaten in 7, looking at a United side that have struggled midweek and taken a battering on the weekend. So I just thought that even though it sounded like it was going to be 3 points, it was one that actually beforehand I was hoping that we'd get a draw out of, really, or best case scenario we'd get a draw out of, because as I say, he seems to get a reaction out of them all the time, really. And when you look at that side, it's frightening going forward, and you look at that back four of ours, and it's not got a lot of pace in it, has it? And then it was almost, we were sitting really deep and inviting the likes of Bruno onto us. But then when we did try and push up, they were get scared, weren't they? Let's be honest, the likes of Coleman, Cody especially. So yeah, it was the first time we've looked off it, but I think it was also the first time that Lampard maybe got it a little bit wrong. I don't know what he would have done to get it right, but it just felt like it was coming. And the goal that Everton scored, probably the worst thing we did, actually, wasn't it? I always think back to that Chelsea game at Wembley where we definitely scored too early. And it just felt a little bit like that. I thought hopefully that Martial coming off and Ronaldo coming on would upset them a little bit, but it almost kind of played into the hands again. And as soon as they get a little bit of confidence and start to move the ball around, we were always chasing shadows, weren't we? So maybe a game too far, but it's now a massive test for us to show reaction, isn't it? So
yeah, I think that the first goal, Patrick, is a weird one, because obviously, it's a great goal and we get it, but I think the mentality after that is quite interesting, because like Adam said there, I think we kind of got caught between doing two different things to the point where we didn't really do either. You know, I've been saying on shows this week that I think we should have absolutely swarmed all over United in those 10 minutes and tried to go for the throat then, because they were vulnerable. We were on top. The crowd were up. It felt like that was the point for Everton to win the game. But we sat so deep and went so negative and allowed Casemiro and Eriksen and Fernandes to dictate the game. But the goals we score actually come from us being on the ball and our fullbacks being ambitious. So it was almost like, well, you can have a sit deep, lads, and try and contain and try and be dead defensive. But when you've got the ball in midfield, don't send your fullbacks marauding forward and leaving space for Anthony and Ronaldo to break into. It just felt like they got a little bit mixed up after scoring that early goal.
Yeah, like I went across on Sunday, so it's the first game I've got to this season, so I've clearly picked them. Although the last game I got to was the Newcastle match last season, so I'm going to start putting a bet on Iwobi to score at the Park End as well the next time I go to Goodison. So I was like literally in the top left corner of the Gladys, so I was right behind that goal, and yeah, it came from us pressing Casemiro and Onana pressing Casemiro and then breaking and we just didn't do it enough. And I think, like you said, Matt, I agree. We just got caught between two stalls in a way. And like Adam mentioned, I was in the build up to it. I wasn't particularly confident. I had a feeling that two things were going to happen. I had a feeling that Ronaldo were going to definitely score his 700th club goal. For one, I'd written a feature on it for work like 3 weeks ago that had been prepped and ready to go. So I knew that was going to happen, and I was convinced Martial was going to score. So the only surprise was that, Martial didn't score. But so I thought, well, we're going to concede at least two. So I went for optimistically went for a 2-2 draw, and we nearly got it. But yeah, I think some of the reaction's been overblown. Like you said, Matt, I think we just got caught in between a bit. Everybody just seemed that yard short for a second ball. And what I said at the time is we kind of, and the atmosphere was flat as well. And, I have to include myself in that. I was there, and obviously we got up for it at the end, but with the atmosphere being flat, with the players not doing anything to push that atmosphere and get it going, bar the early goal, it just turned into a game of football, and Man United have much better footballers than Everton. Christian Eriksen, Casemiro and Bruno Fernandes he might not be a team that you play with on FIFA because there's no pace in there or something like that, but that is three world-class midfielders, and as good as our midfielders looked in at times, it's still coming together, and we're nowhere near that level yet. So yeah, just a bad night at the office, but obviously, as Adam says, it's two very tough away games now to go into, but I think we should and Lampard's presser was good today. I thought and he's won afterwards as well. He was very reflective of where we are, and hopefully we see far less of those type of performances moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of describing it, isn't it, Paul? It become about a football match, and not a battle, and not a game you sort of see at Goodison Park and expect Everton to win. And obviously you want your thoughts on the game as well, but I think just to echo something both the lads have said, Sunday night kickoff should be binned off for the rest of the time. Shouldn't they? They're absolutely horrific. Whether you're watching at home, whether you go in the match, no one wants to watch football at that time.
No, it's just an awful kick-off time, is another example of how football fans are just treated like commodities. The game can just be shifted around, suit the demands of the audience in the US and Asia, and no consideration to local fans at all. Yeah, that was, as Patrick said there, was quite down really. Well, very downbeat considering we're playing Man United, which is always a very intense game. I think, as Adam said there as well, there was kind of a strange feeling of optimism before the game. When I was walking to the ground, I walked past the Royal Oak about 6:20. Heard this almighty roar from outside when Arsenal just got their penalty to go 3-2 ahead, and there's a real kind of buzzy atmosphere. And I was quite surprised by how optimistic some fans were about the game. I mean, one of my friends, who's the most pessimistic Everton fan you'll ever meet in your life, had actually put a bet on before the game for Arsenal to win and Everton to win. And as soon as he told me that, I knew we'd lose, because we never win when he thinks we're going to win. And it was just a strange game. I mean, I think both Patric and Adam mentioned about the midfield in particular. Now, when we played Brentford last season, we were screaming for Lampard to do something about Eriksen, because Eriksen ran the game for Brentford last season, and that's why they won 3-2. I was the same again on Sunday. Every time I looked, Eriksen was in space. I was behind the midfield, in front of the midfield, getting the ball, passing the ball. And I was focused on saying, who's actually put a tackle on this guy in 90 minutes? I might have missed if I didn't see one Everton tackle go in on Everton during the course of the game. As Patrick said, if you get players of that ability, time and space to pick their passes out, then they're just going to tear you apart. I was surprised that that McNeil wasn't playing instead of Anthony Gordon, because I thought the guy's just scored his first goal for Everton. He's on a high. He's full of confidence. Would it not be worth giving? It's against his old club as well. You would have thought this might be an opportunity to give him a chance from the start, with the option being Gordon on as a sub. I think we're all quite agreed. Gordon's performance was woeful on Sunday, probably the worst I've seen from him in Everton shirts. And the one thing that really kind of jarred with me was our midfield's got plenty of pace, got plenty of power with an Arnold and just a gate. We haven't got that much creativity. We haven't had creativity since James Rodriguez left the side. And when you're looking for somebody to open up the defence with a defence splitting pass to see an opportunity, we just didn't have that. And I just felt sorry for Neil Maupay having to deal with an endless stream of balls bombed at into his chest, to his head, with two defenders on him, and they're really struggling to cope. So I was also surprised DCL didn't come on a bit earlier, because he did make a difference when he come on. And going back to your point before, Matt, when we went to United, he didn't look that comfortable. And so it kind of begs the question, could the substitution have been made a bit earlier? But yeah, the brilliant thing would have been to have got the points and gone above Liverpool, because psychologically that would have been such a boost.
Yeah, it certainly would have been nice, but I think if we got a point at the end there from that game, Varane and they've got his head on that ball and Jordan Pickford's towering in front of the Gladys Street and putting that in, I think it would be probably would have been quite undeserved from our point of view, because I think for 80 minutes that match Everton were largely awful. But we do move on. We'll just speak about that game at the weekend and some of the things from Lampard's press conferences a little bit later, lads. I did want to bring up, actually, it was quite an interesting few days for former Everton forwards over the weekend. I don't know if you all saw this, but in the same game at the weekend, Ademola Lookman and Gerard Deulofeu both scored. Deulofeu scoring a great free kick in a game that was 2-2 between Atalanta, I should say, and Udinese. Shani Tarashai, do you remember him?
Yeah,
he was forced to retire.
Swiss guy.
Yeah, forced to retire this week as well. So if you're listening, Shani, best of luck in the next step in your career. And the big one for me, Enner Valencia, who Adam, when I mentioned his name at the start, didn't really know he was still playing. Still 32 years old, mate. As someone who's 33, in the prime years of his life, I should probably say. Scored a hat-trick at the weekend for Fenerbahce. And he's on 10 goals from 7 starts in the Turkish top flight this season. He's going to be playing as well in the first game of the World Cup, playing Ecuador, playing Qatar in the opening game. And he's going to light it up, Adam. He's going to star on the world stage, and we could have signed him for 8 million all those years ago, and we'll probably end up spending 20 million to get him back to the football club in January.
To be fair, Matt, I've probably tried to blank out any of that period of being an Evertonian, actually. So anyone who might have been half decent,
he finished 7th with him. That was a good season.
I thought, well, that was the best we've ever finished in 50 years, according to Ronald Koeman or whatever it was.
He was Ronald Koeman super sub. He was brilliant coming off the bench.
Do you know what? As I say, to be fair, that year that we did finish 7th is probably never used in evidence, because the other years that we finished everywhere and anywhere. And actually, it comes down to the fact that the likes of Enner Valencia, probably a shrewd signing for Everton, one of few in that era especially. And actually, we probably just got rid of players who've got bags of potential, a little bit of graft, you could say, in terms of wanting to play for Everton, wanting to better themselves, and just brought in a load of players on the other side of the curve, on the way down, retirement home, big money, big contracts, and any little diamonds in the rough have been lost. You look at the likes of Deulofeu, Enner Valencia, players who have probably gone on and had to ply the trade elsewhere. But he might have been able to do something against United on Sunday, even at his current age of 32.
Yeah, get him back. Could have had him for 8 million. And do you know what, Patrick? He seems to have got over the incident with the police he had in Ecuador as well, of course, where he was running away from the authorities, I believe, to try and escape his child maintenance payments, wasn't it?
That's the thing. That would just after we'd signed him, wasn't it? Because obviously it was like a normal season, so we got him on deadline day, I think, didn't we? He was our random South American striker that came in on deadline day, very underwhelming. We've had Dennis, I can't even Stracula, so I can never pronounce his last name. And Valencia, Rondon, so we've had a few, but yeah, and then I think it was like 2-3 days later, he was getting taken off, wasn't he, on a stretcher on the back of a golf cart and then legging it down the tunnel. Incredible scenes, absolutely brilliant. But I think, I'm glad I'm glad for him he's doing well at Fenerbahce. I always liked him at West Ham, to be fair. And I think it was, like speaking of the World Cup, I'm pretty sure it was the 2014 World Cup where he maybe scored 3 or 4 goals, and I remember he scored a few that were absolute screamers. Did he score against England? No, did he score against England? No, he played.
West Ham paid a lot of money for him.
West Ham got him off the back of that, and then obviously came to us 2 years later. And yeah, I think that's, we speak about what the Everton squad lack at the minute, and that versatile. Look, we need better than Valencia, but that versatile player with a bit of pace and dynamism across the front line that isn't, knackered after 20 minutes or just doing step overs like Damari Gray does, or doing whatever Dwight McNeil does. He's not really pacey or dynamic. That's what this squad lacks at the minute, and among other things. So maybe if we'd have kept him on, you never know. We might have all been different. Big Sam would have got use out of him anyway, wouldn't he? He'd have loved him.
Yeah. I mean, we signed the 32-year-old former player in the summer, Paul, so could happen again in January.
But as you know, Matt, being in your 30s is no barrier to achievements, is it? So
absolutely not, mate. No.
I think as well. I mean, you look at the Turks League. I'm pretty sure 2 seasons ago, Coney was the top scorer there as well after he left Everton. So maybe it's a bit of a trend here for ex-Everton forwards to go to Turkey and prove themselves to be super strikers. And going back to what you mentioned about Valencia, it might be a thing for Everton strikers, because wasn't there Umar Nias arrested for assaulting his wife just after he signed for Everton as well?
Oh, I don't know on that. I might have to check that. Let's just say allegedly for now, in case I might have to edit it out. Yeah.
Allegedly was involved in an altercation with his partner. I'm pretty sure that broke just after he signed for Everton as well. You mentioned Gerard Deulofeu there. I mean, that's another example of a player who really, because when we signed him from Barcelona, the Barcelona fans were in uproar because he was. I think he was a regular for Spain's under-21. He captained under-21s, and they were criticising the club for letting the talent leave. He was being heralded as the replacement for Messi, and it never quite worked out for the guy. I mean, a good example sometimes of moving to Everton is never the best stepping stone in your career, unfortunately. And Adam Lookman, I think Adam touched upon Koeman there as well. It's so frustrating to watch a player like Lookman, because when he was with us, I think he was only 20. He had bags of potential. He scored in that 4-0 victory over Man City, which seems like an absolute lifetime ago. And we just never developed the guy. Instead of trying to develop good young prospects, we've gone down the route of buying middling average performers on big salaries, and we kind of suffered as a consequence. So, although we have that really good first season under Koeman's charge, I just think his whole attitude towards young players, Ross Barkley being another one as well, Tom Davis, just really set the club back a couple of years. But, I think it gives hope to any forward. Maybe, for Dennis Strachan, that could be his next move. I'm sure he's in his early 30s. I'm sure there's some age in there touting his case to go to Turkey.
Yeah, I saw as well the Besiktas manager was being forced to defend Dele Alli in the week as well. I think he's having a bit of a ropey time over there. Maybe he'll be coming back anytime soon. But yeah, my favourite thing about signing Deulofeu was the online Twitter wind-up account Stamp, who fooled everyone into thinking that Everton had got the signing fee wrong. I think he convinced everybody that Everton thought it was 3.5 million, but Barcelona actually wanted 35 million. Because they put the decimal point in the wrong place. There was uproar online for a few days, and it was in the paper and all sorts. But he ended up coming with a was it buyback clause Barcelona had, which we were all very scared at one point that they were going to activate, but they never did.
I loved Deulofeu. I thought he was brilliant. I remember a cup game up at Middlesbrough.
Yeah,
we won 2-0 away, and he was brilliant. Like, he absolutely ripped them to bits. I think he scored one and set one up for Lukaku. And I just remember driving back from there thinking that was a boss night, and he was the big part of it. But he's just a great Moyes type player who, as you say, probably didn't end up how we wanted him to. But flash in the pan's always nice sometimes. You either live long enough to be a villain or you die a hero, don't you?
I mean, with Deulofeu as well, he obviously had that first loan season, didn't he? And then he went back to Barcelona, we couldn't get him back for Martinez's second season. Did he play at Sevilla, I think?
Yeah, I think he went to Seville, didn't he?
And then we obviously signed him for Martinez's last season, and then that I remember the Barnsley game when we played there, and 5-3 that finished, and he came on. Deulofeu came on for McGeady at halftime. That was McGeady's last game for Everton. McGeady was absolutely awful in that first half, and Martinez had finally had enough of him. Even Martinez had had enough of him, and then Deulofeu came on and kind of just tore it up, obviously against Barnsley. But that first half of that season, it gets forgotten because we played some really good stuff that first half of the season. We had the League Cup run, and there was a time where it was about 4 or 5 games in a row where Deulofeu just kept setting Lukaku up, either with crosses or through balls. But because we couldn't defend, we were just, we weren't getting anything from them. I think he set him up against Bournemouth, West Ham, Norwich, I remember. And then Martinez stopped using him for some reason. Then I think for Koeman's first game, Lukaku might have been injured. And he played Deulofeu up front as a striker against Spurs. And it looked like
his debut.
Yeah, he's finally, he's finally found a position. And then again, Koeman just stopped using him. And it's who do you blame, the player or the manager? And he's probably a bit of both, isn't it? But I do think Serie A probably suits him as well. It's a pretty open league now. There's the stereotype of the tough Italian defences, but there's some proper tin pot teams in that league, and it's pretty open. So I'm glad he's doing well anyway. I think he still follows Everton, so
yeah, we'll always have
jobs for the boys in a few years. He can be our set piece coach in 5 years.
Yeah, if Martinez had come back instead of Lampard, then we would have signed him this summer.
Yeah, and they need to stop using him after 4 months again. But anyway.
Oh God, yeah. We'll always have very, very wind, won't we? That's one we'll never forget. But speaking of wingers, Adam, who get out of breath very quickly and flatter to deceive at times, let's move on to speak about Anthony Gordon. Probably a bit harsh on Gordon, that. But I watched Frank Lampard's press conference today, and Frank is very level-headed, doesn't really get too carried away about things positively or negatively. But I couldn't help but notice a significant change in tone when Anthony Gordon's name was brought up and the suspension was brought up. And Lampard obviously likes to give these long answers. When he was asked about Gordon, he was very short, very abrupt. And, it seems like Lampard is a little bit pissed off of Anthony Gordon based on the fact he's obviously been booked 5 times already. He's going to miss the game at the weekend. He's only started 8 games, hasn't he, as well? Because obviously he came off the bench against Southampton. But I think there's obviously a bit of a wider thing here with Gordon as well, isn't there? Obviously, he's getting frustrated. He's losing his discipline. As Paul mentioned, he's not playing well. And just feels like he's in a little bit of a funny situation at the moment.
The thing about Anthony Gordon is, and I'm a big Anthony Gordon fan, total polar opposite to my dad, who is not convinced on Anthony Gordon at all, really. And it probably is a battle of the Dars on him, because all the ability in the world, he's the profile that we all love, the young scouter who's come through, who's going to light it up for us and become the hero for free, that we haven't paid a penny for, that is just going to steal the hearts of young Evertonians growing up, really. But there's something about Anthony Gordon, and I don't know whether it's the Chelsea interest. I don't know whether it's the number 10 on his back now. I don't know whether it's people exercising a new contract for him. I just think the last couple of weeks, he's just gone off the boil a little bit, and he might be starting to believe his own hype. But actually, I thought maybe that United game, a couple of those Everton players might have started to believe their own hype in a way. And I think if your main man, the guy you've put all your hopes on, with that number 10 shirt being the personification of it, really, is that he's going to have up and down games. He's going to have games where he's on it, and he's going to have games that he isn't. But I think he's just probably floundering a little bit in between maybe positions and in between maybe a mindset of what he is and what he's going for. And if you almost pair that with what you alluded to there, Matt, is he's just goofed after about 20 minutes. I don't know whether it's the Evertonian in him that goes, I'm just going to go mad for 20 minutes here and see what I can do. And then he turns into an actual Evertonian in the Gladys Street 4 pints down who's struggling to get up the stairs. He just looks like he goes after a short period of time. And don't get me wrong, I do the same when I play footy, but I think I nearly tweeted you the other day, Matt, when you mentioned that. You alluded to him losing his breath pretty quickly. He doesn't seem to have a second wind, Anthony Gordon. And I think it's actually a mental and physical thing as well. And we've had a few players over the years that this was very similar to, that if your first 5-10 minutes is good and you beat your man and you get a good ball in, or you start well, then the game usually goes well for you. Whereas Anthony Gordon, I think if he struggles first 5-10 to get on it, get involved, he doesn't feel like he's part of the game really. He hasn't got that patience yet, or he hasn't got that persistence yet to almost let the game come to him, bide your time, and it'll happen. And therefore, that period of the game where he doesn't feel involved, once he gets a chance to get involved, he loses his head. And that was exactly what happened against United on Sunday. He gave the ball away, and he just knew straight away he's going to go chase someone here and he's going to lose his rag. And he did. I think he ran into the corner right in front of the United fans. And granted, he may have got the ball, but the referees just watched him lose the ball, lose his head, and then lose his balance pretty quickly and take someone out. But listen, I like Anthony Gordon, and other Evertonians that have come through for Everton in previous years are Evertonians, and that's probably where that ends. Whereas Anthony Gordon, I think, has got all the ability in the world. It just needs to be channeled in the right way. And Frank Lampard might be there playing a little bit of a game with him and saying, do you know what? I've praised you all throughout this saga with Chelsea. I've given you all the support you need. We're talking about a new contract. You've got the number 10. Now, actually, it's time to knuckle down and really make a difference, because it's not all green grass when you're talking about playing for Everton and being the main man here. You've got to back it up. And I thought he backed it up very well in the first 3 or 4 games. But that's the thing with Everton players and with young Everton players coming through. You've got to show consistency. And if Anthony Gordon's losing his head and missing games that he needs to be available for, then Frank Lampard's got all the right in the world to be upset about it. And maybe, I don't know what you thought, but there was a hint to me there that Lampard, the penny only just dropped that he was getting suspended. And it's almost a bit of a shock as well as him realising, I am angry about this. And as you say, 8-9 games in and you've got 5 bookings is for a left winger. You're probably not doing something right, are you really?
No, absolutely. And, Paul, I just wondered if the last few months have just all of a sudden become a bit too much for him in both a physical and mental sense, because not only, as Adam alluded to there, I think absolutely right, that he plays like he is someone out the stands, and he will run like he's like someone who's not played 5-a-side for ages, and he gets on the pitch, charges around for 20 minutes, like, bloody hell, I am knackered here. It's a bit like that, and you can tell he feels it and he feeds off that emotion, but he's had the emotion of being involved in a relegation battle that went effectively to the wire with his team and the club he's loved and the club he's grew up with. He's had the summer where he's been on the back pages and on websites every day. He's had all the noise around it where people going, £60 million for him. Oh my God, you're kidding, aren't you? You would have heard all that as well. And I just wonder if it's just all become a bit too much, a bit too soon, because he just looks flat, doesn't he, at the moment? He just looks really, really flat in all aspects of his game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Adam said there as well. There's also the added pressure being the local and trying to make the grade of the club as well. I think as well, if you look at Anthony Gordon, towards the end of last season, last 1 or 2 games, I thought his form had just dipped a little bit then, because prior to that, his form was one of the key elements in keeping us up. I think there's no argument for saying that maybe he felt the pressure more than most other players last season when being a local lad, because quite often he stayed behind at the end of the games when we'd lost and go over and speak to the fans. So you can see he really felt it as well. I'm sure, when Chelsea come in, and bid 60 million for you after your first full season at the club, you kind of think, well, I mean, it's like, I don't know, Matt, but it's like if Radio 5 came Tuesday, went, by the way, Matt, we've got to increase your salary to 600 grand a year. I want you to be in charge of Radio 5 Sports. Are you interested? Well, yeah, of course, your head's going to be turned, isn't it?
I'm loyal to the Blue Room. Yeah, but so never say never in podcasting.
And but I'm sure that's been part of a factor as well. Yeah, he doesn't look in full condition at the moment. I'm not quite sure why that was. And I think as well, it's a worrying trend, isn't it, for young Everton prospects, local lads who don't quite make the grade here. If you look back, say, over the last 30 years or so, you had Billy Kenny, who's one of the best midfielders I'd seen in the mid-90s. His career fell off. Michael Branch, who's being touted as a future England forward, his career ended up in going to prison, I think. Franny Jeffers, his career never took off as an Everton player. Ross Barkley's done nothing since he left the club. So there's 4 really good local footballers who, for what reason or another, have not quite made the grade at Everton. You could use the same argument for Tom Davies as well, who looked a really good prospect 4 or 5 seasons ago. So it is a worry. I think there's a real. You mentioned your dad's opinion about Anthony Gordon. I think there's a real divide amongst local fans, a generational divide, because some of the people sit around by me in Old Bullens absolutely hate Anthony Gordon. He can't do anything wrong. He can't do anything right. So it's like, I think you made the grade lad do, I think Chelsea have to, and all this sort of stuff all the way through the match. Whereas the more rational, younger Everton fan is quite, it's quite sanguine about the whole thing, saying he's a good player. He's going to have a different form from time to time. But the original point about the 5 yellow cards, that's just sheer madness. It's not as if he's making goal-saving tackles in every game. So he really has to work on that element of his contribution to the team, because we haven't got massive strength and depth. We can't afford to be losing one of our key players. And I think one of the things, looking at him is he definitely needs to work more on his goal output, because he really should be providing more goals for the team, given the opportunities they're often created and he creates himself. So I really hope that this is just a blip. I really hope he learns from the way Lampard is kind of his anger towards him at the moment, whether that's going to be a motivating factor for him or not. But he's a really good prospect, and nothing would hurt me more than to see 12 months down the line him making a move away from Everton and his career stalling.
Paul used the word there, Patrick, and sanguine, and I think that's quite right. It's, I was saying this on one of the shows this week. Is this just a bit of an awkward situation for everyone now? Because I think I wouldn't say he's adored in the same way that maybe Rooney or even Ross Barkley was when they first broke onto the scene. I think if we're being all brutally honest, if someone had said in the summer, 45 million, 50 million up front, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but I think we all probably would have taken that money. I think Anthony Gordon himself probably would have thought, Chelsea, Champions League, manager like Thomas Tuchel, I wouldn't mind going. And we all sort of were ready for this to happen. He was probably ready for it to happen, and it's not happened. And it's kind of like, oh, well, what now? You're here, and we actually would have probably preferred the money. And he's thinking, well, actually, I'm still Everton, and I probably would have preferred playing in the Champions League. Is there a bit of that involved in all this, do you think?
I think perhaps, and I was one of the, I was very vocal about it as well. I think it might have been listening to the weekly the other day, Matt, and you mentioned how out the media had been going, the general media, not the Everton media, had been saying Everton fans would be delighted that Anthony Gordon stayed. And it's I don't think Chelsea, from what I know anyway, I don't think Chelsea ever did actually bid 60 million. I think it was there was talk that they would go up to that. But if we could have guaranteed that we'd have got anywhere near that amount, I do think the club would have sold as well. And I think ultimately it just got too late in the window for anything to happen, because Everton would have had to get replacements in themselves, and it all becomes a bit too much. So maybe I think there is part of that. A lot of me thinks though, I like Anthony. I think he's a good talent, like Adam, and I think we can all see the talents there. But I don't actually know if what he's doing right now is much different in terms of his actual output, his actual impact on the game. Is much different to what he did for a large part of last season. The difference is last season he seemed to have that drive about him. He seemed to have that, the impetus to get everywhere on the pitch, to try and make things happen, even if it didn't always come off. Whereas on Sunday, he just looked, I don't use this word often, but I think he hid on Sunday. And I'm not saying he did that on purpose, but it was like he gave up after the first 10 or 15 minutes. And then it's hard when we weren't getting the ball to the forward players enough to get them involved in the game. But then there's always got to be that trade-off of, the forward players weren't making the runs and the movement to get in the game. And especially with Anthony Gordon, that was definitely the case. I do think if you take a step back as well, where did his best games this season come from? Playing on the left against Brentford and Leeds. And Paul mentioned how he needs to add more goals, and I think we can all agree on that. But on the flip side, I think the three chances he's had this season that I can think of the top of my head, three really big chances, were the Villa game where he scored. It was just disallowed, obviously, for a marginal offside, but fair enough. And then Brentford and Leeds, and he put them both away.
The only one I want to say is Forest at home.
The Forest
Henderson came out, didn't he?
Yeah, so that one as well. But again, if you look where that chance came, it's that left-hand channel, and I think that's where you want him if he's going to score goals. If he's on the right, it needs to be more about and this is where I think the style of play comes into it a bit. Everton don't cross the ball enough. We just don't. And I don't know if it's a Lampard thing. I don't know if it's the players. I don't know if it's not having the support from the fullbacks, but we constantly go back into midfield too much. Gordon's guilty of that as well. And it's like, if he's on the right, I think the best thing he's good at is, getting half a yard and putting a ball in. Okay, his crossing might not be perfect, but it's better than him running around in circles and then losing it like he did for the yellow card the other day and then charging back and getting a booking. But I just think generally, I think the main thing that's missing is that effort. And look, I'm sure he is putting the effort in, but it seems to be just lacking at the minute. And then when you combine that with the fact that he does look knackered after 20 minutes, maybe that's just the impact of being played far too much last season. I think a big part of our issues last season, as good as Anthony Gordon was at times, is the fact that we relied on a 20 to 21-year-old who was making his first Premier League, breakthrough season. We relied on him to be our creator, our goal scorer. When Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin were out, he was our talisman. And I think that told at the end of the season as well. I agree with Paul, he looked absolutely shattered. I think of that Watford game, he was just knackered. Leicester, I think he just looked absolutely drained. And look, you can't blame the lad. And maybe that's going to take some time to get over. Maybe, because he went away with the under-21s and didn't have a full pre-season and things like that. So, and then obviously, like you said, Matt, all the transfer stuff on top. In an ideal world, and this is what Everton need to do in January, we need a player that's going to come in and give us that quality in those front areas. Because if we don't, as much as we've improved, I think we are going to be looking at maybe March time of being maybe not in the mire like last season, but there could still be a danger. Whereas I think if we add that player in, generally, I think we'll be fine. We'll be 10th, 11th reasonably because the rest of the team is looking better. And in turn, that can mean Gordon isn't relied on. I don't think him and Gray playing together works because they both want to do the same thing. So as a whole things, and I think on the positive side, yeah, he's suspended for Saturday. Hopefully that gives him the kick up the arse that's needed as well. Maybe Lampard will look at it and think, no, do you know what? I'm going to give McNeil a run and we'll see what McNeil can do. Or he's going to say, well, we need some creativity in that final third now. So I'm going to put Alex Iwobi onto the left and let him drift in, and pack the midfield and put James Garner in or put Decore in. We've got options. So let's just hope that maybe a 2-week break out the side is what he needs. And then, with the World Cup coming up, I know he's hoping to go, but there's absolutely no chance unless Southgate's completely lost his mind by then. There's no chance. I mean, if he played right back, I'm sure he'd be in with a shot. So, and then, maybe a good break will just do him good, and we'll see a better Anthony Gordon in the second half of the season, and then see what happens from there. There'll probably still be interest next year. Even if he didn't score another goal all season and only maybe set up one other goal or provide another assist, look, we've shown with Dwight McNeil, someone will pay money for you. So I don't think we need to worry about that, and hopefully it's just growing pains.
The only thing with that is we haven't got an Everton to come in and buy from Everton, have we?
Yeah, but there's always look. Eddie Howe seems to really like him. That's the thing. I'm sure there'll be if Newcastle can just get in the head that they don't want to go spend 40 million on Diaby from Leverkusen or someone like that, just be like, no, there's fine. There's always going to be an Everton. There's always going to be an Everton.
Go on, Adam. You sure you want to make a point, mate?
I think the bottom line is that 21 years of age, isn't he really? And that is it's taken totally out of context as a footballer, isn't it? And you think these lads who are 18, 19, 20, 21 can handle all of the pressure on the pitch, handle it all off the pitch, able to play a huge part in the club staying up. The first 6-7 games of the season, he's been good, he was our top scorer, wasn't he, essentially? And now maybe the adrenaline's just worn off a little bit for Anthony Gordon. He felt under the weather last week. And yeah, I think being realistic here, we all want Andy Gordon to succeed at Everton for more reasons than one, and there would be nothing better than seeing him come back after a suspension, little bit of a break, little bit of a reality check, and you kick on now. And who knows, if he goes and scores 10 goals by now in the beginning of December, maybe we'll be eating our words regarding him on the plane. But we'll see. I think Anthony Gordon's, he's got all the ability in the world, and if he can get himself there, then yeah, we can all enjoy it.
Yeah, could be vying with Enner Valencia for top scorer in Qatar. You never know. But yeah, he's not going to be involved on Saturday. As I said, he's suspended. Going to be a tough game, isn't it, Paul? You know, Spurs, I think, watched them at times this season and thought they looked quite stodgy and not really quite up to it. Maybe don't really necessarily know the best side, but I think in the last couple of games, you know, Brighton, they dug it out. Watched them a bit last night as well. Made some bad defensive errors, but going forward, they are electric, and it's going to be tricky for us to go there and try and contain those attacking plays that they've got.
Oh, undoubtedly, yeah. I mean, I think, as you said there, I think defensively they're not quite there yet, Tottenham. So I think, you know, there's a chance we might be able to get something there, because I don't think there's cohesive in the defensive as you would like them to be. But yeah, they've certainly got the best front pairing in Kane and Son. I mean, the pace that those two have. And if you remember the nightmare of that 5-0 defeat at White Hart Lane last season, when Michael Caine probably was his worst game in Everton shirt, we got absolutely destroyed on the break every time. So, you know, you kind of look at, you know, I went back and watched the Arsenal v Tottenham highlights again before this. And you kind of see the way Arsenal approached that game. In the first 5-10 minutes, they bombarded Tottenham, didn't give them time to settle. Then they dropped back a little bit to try to do really ready to deal with the counter-attack. Okay, Tottenham got a goal back, but in the end, the tactics worked, because in the second half, you know, they played the same way. They didn't allow Tottenham to cast them out on the break, and they went on to win the game 3-1. So I think, you know, watch from last season's experience, it has to be drummed into the side that we can't play too high a back line, because we're just going to get caught out. We can't get possession away cheaply like we did against Man United, because once again, we kind of whip the fullbacks out of position, we get hits on the break again. So that's really got to be a crucial thing. Whether we go for a more defensive midfield option, I'm not quite sure. But there's a couple of things that are bound to happen in this game. You know, one is Richarlison hasn't scored a Premier League goal this season, has he? So that's a definite, you know, get a bet on for that one. I think Harry Kane has scored 13 goals in his last 14 matches against Everton. 6 times he scored 2 goals against us in a match. So I think that's another bet as well, isn't it? So, and I think we've won one of our last 19 games against
Patric's counting up here, so you're going to have to win 4-3 then, basically. Yeah.
So we won one of our last 19 games against Tottenham. But then again, we're a much better team than last season. You know, we have improved. We're much more defensively solid than last season. Now, I think Patric mentioned about the lack of pace with Cody and Tarkowski in the defence. Well, so it's imperative that we don't get caught too far forward for Kane and Son to get in behind us. And then we've got to work and trying to create some chances ourselves. I'm not sure it was Adam or Patrick mentioned about the lack of crosses that Everton provide during games, because that is always the way to open the defence. I mean, they've got 1 or 2 dodgy defenders, and I've never been convinced by Romero. He looks like a walking red card half the time. Eric Dyer, I mean, no, I've never been convinced by Eric Dyer. So, and Hugo Lloris to me is a very overrated keeper, because he always seems capable of making a mistake. I'm always quite astounded when Pickford gets criticised, but Lloris never seems to get any major criticism for the mistakes he makes for Tottenham. So we've got a chance. I think it's going to be a really tough challenge for us, but I can see us, you know, possibly sneaking a point there. I mean, maybe I'm being overly optimistic here, but I think, you know, Lampard being an ex-Chelsea manager would also love to get something over on Tottenham as well. So, you know, and maybe Richie might just go easy on us. You never know.
Yeah, talk yourself into a 3-all there, mate. Yeah, do you know what, Patrick? I think it was this game last season where, you know, as Paul mentioned, where Lampard probably thought, I can't play this style of football with these lads, and things changed quite a lot from that. So, as much as, you know, it's going to be a hard game, they've got great players, and if they play well, then it's going to be hard for us to get anything. I'd be very surprised if we went there with the same level of naivety as we did last season, and that should make it a bit more difficult for Tottenham at least.
Yeah, I'm probably live to regret this, because we know Spurs are scoring at least 3 based on what Paul said, and the Richarlison 93rd minute winner is really gonna sting. But just get ready for it now.
He'd definitely celebrate as well, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah, I mean, fair play, and we'll all go, yeah, fair enough. Like, because we all still love him deep down. There'll be initial hatred, but then we'll get over it. But yeah, I'm trying to look at the positives. I look at Spurs and look at our squad, and I just think it's a bad matchup, not just in terms of quality, just how they can play. And to counter it, obviously, I think we can say that I am confident it won't be another 5-0. Or it's 5-0? It's 5-6, 5-0, yeah. Yeah, it will bad that. I am confident it won't be another 5-0. Mainly because Michael Keane probably isn't going to play. But I do wonder if like Lampard might for this game. I really don't like when managers do it normally. Like if like match a team up based on the system they play. But I do think with Spurs, and it's not like we've not played with a back three, even though it wasn't great. I do wonder if he'll just tweak things, even if it's kind of a very slanted back three with Coleman, like a back four on paper, but Coleman maybe tucked a bit more inside. Maybe he has to sacrifice Iwobi in that sense and play him as a right wing back and just see if we can reduce the space between the lines for Son if Richarlison plays, or if it's Kane dropping in with Kulusevski on the right. If we can just reduce that space and then simultaneously get some numbers in midfield.
Oh, Patric's just frozen. Go on, mate. Just you were saying about how you get numbers in midfield and then you.
Sorry. If I'm back, I'd probably start Decore in this match, or I wouldn't be against him starting. I think there's been a collective excitement about Onana, and some people maybe disregarded Decore, but he's still a good player, and I just pat the midfield. Whether we go with a back four or a back five, and I think the only question is, if it's Iwobi or McNeil who replaces Gordon. But I can't say I'm massively confident. But we'll see. Could pull a surprise out of the hat.
Feels like one of those games that Everton need to get it very right, and Tottenham need to have a bad day at the office, really. And I think we might have said it before the game that was cancelled a couple of weeks ago, Matt, where it was one of those, you just feel like the periods of the game that you know are huge parts of it, your first 10, 15 minutes in the first half and your first 10, 15 minutes in the second half. If Everton can navigate those, they can almost start to grow in confidence, really. And I think that's what's a massive part of our game at the moment, really, is riding the wave and almost getting away with things, getting lucky. But of course, having luck is also coming from right place, right time, a little bit of organisation, a little bit of snarky nature that I think Everton have actually brought into their game this season. So agreed, we've got to be shrewd throughout the first periods, but we've also got to ride our luck a little bit. And who knows, it's one of those. I think Everton losing against United and then losing against Spurs, it starts to look as if like, here we go again type of thing. So if we can get a result down there, it feels more than just a point or 3 points, who knows. But if we can get a result down at Spurs, it almost says to me that these are a bit more of a real deal than they were last season. It's not just a bit of a run that we went on and then here we go again. We've turned back into Everton. If we can get something down at White Hart Lane on Saturday, then it'll be really pleasing for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I'd definitely go with the back three that Patrick mentioned there. The idea of Son playing up against Coleman and Cody in that channel. Ronaldo's not as quick as he was, but he left Cody for dead, didn't he, at the weekend? And I think Iwobi right wing back, Coleman into the back three, try and just close off those gaps. I think has got to be the way to go. If we go there with any kind of attacking endeavour, I think we'll struggle. But yeah, we will leave it there. I'm not going to ask for predictions, lads, because Pop maybe off Paul, because he sounded like he was convincing himself that we're going to win 4-3. But it is open. The lads can do it. But we'll see. We'll leave it there. Patrick's got off already. Obviously, very, very unhappy that I didn't ask him for a prediction. But I hope he enjoyed himself on the show. Cheers to Paul. Cheers to Adam. Thanks, as well. We'll be back later in the week. I can't believe that. Great timing. We'll be back later in the week with instant match reaction for that Tottenham game. We've got more from us as ever. We are on Patreon, patreon.com/theblueroomextra. Loads of stuff going on there. Me and Rob, we're going to be having a chat tomorrow for our Keep Talking show. He's got very het up on social media today in an argument with Dave Downey about Yerry Mina. So
Rob Vera and Dave Downey have been arguing on Twitter.
I've got to follow this.
Would you believe it? But yeah, we'll get into all that tomorrow. So it's patreon.com/theblueroomextra. If you want to hear more from us, weekend preview and mailbag tomorrow as well. So tons going into the weekend. But yeah, that's been your weekly show. Up the Toffees. We'll speak to you again very soon.